I'm Laura Giles. I'm an educator and a board member for the Yale Center for Faith and Culture and a fellow listener. This podcast is just part of the wonderful work that the center does to create a more just and flourishing society. In a world that seems increasingly fragmented and polarized, the center creates points of connection between people who might otherwise seem to be quite different. But by asking the right questions and listening, the team behind this work creates a realm of mutual understanding that I believe is critical. Please consider supporting this work by making a generous December donation at faith.yale.edu/give. Your generosity is invaluable to this work that I believe is knitting our culture back together.
Friends, a word before we get into it today. This episode is sobering. It contains descriptions of violence and extended reflection about school shootings where children are involved. Many of you may find it very disturbing. I certainly do, and in many ways, I found it very hard to listen back and edit. It's also a heavily politicized topic. But in this episode, we keep it personal. My guest and I agree that policy does matter, but policy always and only ever should exist for the people that it impacts and serves. But we present it in a spirit of remembrance. And our guest today is able to offer a glimpse into the beauty of grief that leads to healing action and the beauty of childhood, despite it all. So with that, I encourage you to stay with us. From the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, this is For the Life of the World, a podcast about seeking and living a life worthy of our humanity.
I just happened to have moved to Newtown from Charleston, South Carolina in July of that year. And so that was December of that first year. And I was teaching a class down at Fairfield University where I'm a professor of poetry, and secretary stuck her head in and let me know that something was happening. And luckily, my office was directly across from my classroom, so I went and sat at my computer, and she said, "There's something happening in Newtown. I don't know what school yet." And I do remember this 20 or 30 second period where we were trying to find out what school and what happened.
This is Carol Ann Davis. She's a poet and an essayist and a professor of English at Fairfield University, where she's the founding director of Poetry in Communities, an initiative that provides poetry curricula to communities hit by sudden or systemic violence. In 2012, she found herself the mother of 2 elementary school kids in Newtown, Connecticut. She described to me the haunting sequence of events that happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th, 2012, 13 years ago today.
Right here in Newtown, Connecticut, the site today of a mass shooting, and this time, gunfire aimed at elementary school children. There are 27 victims, 20 children, 7 adults. And we've heard all day about the incredible response by teachers inside the school.
This morning, the Sandy Hook Elementary School was full of kids concerned about Christmas. And then at 9:40 a.m., shots rang out.
All units, the individual that I have on the phone is continuing to hear what he believes to be gunfire.
Inside, little kids are under attack.
There was maybe 90 seconds of just not really understanding. And then the next thing I remember is just my colleague next office over, who lives in New Milford, which is one town over, just coming and grabbing me into this enormous bear hug as we discovered the extent of what was happening. And he and I, we don't socialize necessarily the way you do with colleagues, but I often think he was with me on my darkest day. And his answer was this incredible human gesture. And then he ran outside and screamed because he couldn't hold it, for more than a minute.
Consider that crushing fear, that hollowing out, the panicky feeling that comes when you only have enough information to suggest something terribly wrong came terribly close to your child. Those seconds somehow shift into eternity. Is my kid okay? Is my child alive? But some people don't want to imagine, at least not to the full extent. And others with good, humble intentions say they can't imagine. Really though? Because of course you can. You just have to let yourself call more of the experience to mind. You have to sink down into the what it's likeness and explore. No, it's not easy. But in some important sense, you have to. You have to.
And in Sandy Hook in particular, I would often hear people say, I can't imagine. Like, people would say that, and they were saying it in a kind way, Can't imagine living there. I can't imagine. And I wanted people to imagine. I felt like if we're Americans and we're going to go ahead and not change this gun policy, then actually it's your job to try and imagine.
So back to December 14th, 2012. It's a few minutes before 10 a.m. The bell at Sandy Hook Elementary School had just rung. And time for Carol Ann and many others is at a standstill.
My boys went to Hawley School, which is about 2 miles from Sandy Hook. And there are 4 public elementary schools in Newtown, along with several different private schools. And so I know for sure that my husband was texting me, letting me know that, that he and Luke were fine, and that he was watching the news and figuring things out. And then pretty soon, each of us got a message from our principal at Hawley. And she said something amazing, because it became a refrain in how I understood it. She said, "Nothing has happened at Hawley School. Please hear me. I have opened every door and seen your children." Because it was almost impossible to take that in. I have opened every door and seen your children. And that is one of the wonderful things about being a writer. I think that I am so grateful I have the document of when I tried to nail the time down. As a writer, you also allow mystery in, you allow unknowing to still remain there.
Carol Ann, as a poet, observes life without abstraction, with an attentiveness to the sharp details of our worlds, allowing herself to be nailed to the moment, refusing to overlay the artifice of a narrative plotline onto a bountiful life of multiverses and individual perspectives and experiences, where each and every frame of each and every experience contains its own eternity. This was her activism, to offer words that might begin moving toward the horror, the inhumanity of it, the profound grief, and the lasting scar.
The phrase that we used to say in Newtown, we said directly affected families. We now say families of loss, people who were directly affected. And we began to understand that there were these ripple effects. But it's going to sound strange to say, but there was a blessing to being useful in Newtown in a way that I think wasn't true elsewhere after that event. One reason we focused so much on directly affected families as a phrase and not on what had happened to other people who lived there was because it was an honor and also just deeply human at practice to work to try and assist directly affected families.
Nothing has happened, and yet everything has happened. That's just one of the rhythmic refrains that emerges in the words Carol Ann uses to rebuild December 14th, 2012. But it's another refrain, this time her own words, that hits me. Quote, "And that was what it is not to suffer. This is the not suffering, happy ending story." End quote.
So there really was a period where nothing had happened at Hawley School felt totally true. And then it hit me, I think, as a writer, maybe earlier than other people, because of how my work makes me narrow focus. Like I'm always narrowing focus to say, okay, what did happen to me? And then parenting, of course, is a narrowing of focus as well. So what is happening to my children? And then there was that work. And then there was whatever work, of course, that anyone could be called to do that was appropriate, that would help anyone with a direct effect. However, I think I realized pretty early on that there was very little I could do for anyone who was in that situation. And I sort of set about the outer rim of just writing poetry in community because that felt good to me.
The collection of words she began recording in the wake of this ugliness, this evil, became a book she published 8 years later, in 2020. The Nail in the Tree, Essays on Art, Violence, and Childhood. Mirroring that slow growth of a tree gradually incorporating and absorbing, integrating a rusted nail into its living flesh. The book is a devastating set of observations that pulls you into each moment of trauma, suffering, and grief, allowing the spectrum of words, both available and unavailable, to hold you in this confusion, this anger, and that tender sadness of it all.
Carol Ann, thank you so much for joining me on For the Life of the World.
Thank you for having me, Evan. I'm pleased to be here.
Carol Ann Davis is also author of a forthcoming book of poetry, Songbird, a flowing set of lyrical verse that allows her to move from the conflict of violence in childhood she felt up close in Newtown in 2012 back into her own childhood experience. And the result is a beautiful phenomenology of childhood, bodily experience, innocence that matures into wisdom, and what it means to sing the song of one's own life. In this conversation, she and I remember the victims and the families of loss on this 13th anniversary of the Sandy Hook school shooting. She reflects on how lived trauma narrows our attention, exhausts and then reshapes our language, how plot-based narratives might actually diminish meaning, and how poetry, parenting, and faith dwell inside the human capacity for violence without resolution or closure.
My older son was in the 4th grade when Sandy Hook happened, and he was in the 9th grade when Parkland happened. So part of this journey was walking with my boys as they just entered language in different ways, as you do, as you just progress in your intellectual life. And for my older boy, gun violence was a companion through that time. And I know I use that word in a paradoxical way to say part of parenting is identifying trends in your child's life and what they might be. And for him, there were these markers of formativity that had to do with being in the 4th grade when this happened in his town and being in the 9th grade. So for one event, he had a figurative understanding, which I'm going to explain, which was the nail in the tree. And for the next event, or not even the next, but for the next one for him, he had a more of an activist understanding. But for my son being in the 4th grade, the nail in the tree is his understanding. And when he was 9 years old, he said to me, I think of the shooting as a nail driven into the tree, and I'm the tree, and I'm going to grow strong and tall, but I have this nail. And if I pull it out, it actually hurts me. So I have to learn to love the tree and the nail, Mom. And it was within 2 months of it happening, he had this figurative, imaginative relation. That was how he conceptualized it. And actually, by the time the book came out, he was a teenager and he said, like, I never said that. That's too beautiful. He said, Mom, you made that up and you said that I said it. And I thought when he said that to me, that was sort of the tree, like growing, like over where the nail had been.
Oh my.
Right. To the point where he wasn't healed or anything. That isn't even like in the concept, but a kind of accommodating.
I wonder if there's an integration is the word.
Something. I don't know.
Yeah. Like integration comes to mind because it's such a vivid metaphor that I think at once, and I think it's important to put in the context of this event to bring home the reality that this impacts children.
Right.
And the nature of childhood is very much in question here. And the way that adult society treats children. And I think we don't treat them with nearly enough seriousness, and we don't take them seriously enough. And we don't let this kind of wisdom soak into us nearly enough or integrate into us. And I think it's a beautiful thing to say, probably beyond what he could understand even at the time.
Right.
Like the extent of what that means, because of the simplicity with which a child sees something like that. And then to integrate it into oneself and become forgetful even.
Right. Or possibly maybe even moving through it with such engagement that he moved through it onto other parts of it. He was still dealing with gun violence. I mean, the Newtown High School children walked out the day that the Parkland children walked out.
Yeah.
That was what was going on while I was writing the introduction.
Wow.
I was like listening for that, and I was down the street from that. I just want to be near it while he did it.
I think that kind of solidarity requires that kind of, again, the narrowed focus. You can't have that form of solidarity without a narrowed focus to understand that it was forced in the case of Newtown children. They had to, but we need to take our own lesson from that. And this is the point I really enjoyed about your commenting about the narrowing here, and what that tells me about your ability to say something about this event as a writer and poet, because there is a point at which you do wonder how the limits of policy talk about it.
Yeah, there was a period for sure when I could only be narrow. I could only be in Sandy Hook. Like, people were having big policy conversations, and sometimes I'd run into people who'd want to have them with me. Like, and I would just be like, I'm writing poetry and raising kids and playing soccer here. Like, I don't know. It was important to just be here and do those things that I could do, and let maybe other Americans call themselves in to other parts of it. It was more than one thing. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Trying to pull in an affected member of the community, like, as you say, a family of loss or a directly affected family, to attempt to pull them out of that narrowness into the broadness of a policy debate. It's not to say debates can't be narrow or that policy debates have to be unhelpfully broad, that there is an importance to codifying law about this, but there is some kind of injustice that happens when you force someone out of the narrow focus into something broader that's really just a spectacle.
I think what was fascinating and really beautiful to watch over time with all, I would say every single one of those families contributed something unbelievably generous to our world. You know, the world after the worst thing that could happen had happened to them. They showed up. They showed up according to their own sets of interests. So some of them did do policy work, and they did amazing policy work. That was their special interest or way of being a father to their child and a mother to their child, parents of their child. Of course, you know, I can't mention them all, and we all know the work of Sandy Hook Promise, but it's sort of according to, I'm guessing, a deep discernment process in each one. But that's the hard part, is like you only walk a certain amount in that work because there's so many unknowns for that experience.
You have this refrain throughout the first piece in the Nail-O-Metry, which is, as you describe your personal experience,
right?
Your starting point, your narrow starting point. And that is what it is not to suffer that day. This is the not suffering, happy ending story.
Right.
And what is, first time I read through that, I felt that like a kind of pang of context, right? The contextualizing nature of that statement is powerful. And the device of repetition.
Right.
Because as you narrate a horror that as a father and as many parents listening can understand, the horror of considering the fear of losing one's child in this way.
Right.
Of losing one's child at all. It is helpful to it does appropriately broaden the focus somehow because you're allowing context to come in.
I just have an aversion to the idea of story anyway. Like the idea of a story. Like I don't love story.
Say more.
So I don't love beginnings, middles, and ends. I don't believe life feels that way. So I feel it's almost unethical to chop experience up into a story. And often a story is, you'll know, we can get into it, but I love me some King James Bible, and I am absolutely a Southern Baptist. However, I do blame the parable for what's happened with stories in American culture. So
wonderful. Tell me, please continue. Please continue. So
now I'm really alienating 98% of people because who doesn't love story? But I think stories lie to us. They teach us the wrong stuff sometimes. Not that Jesus did, but,
I'm not afraid to hear you say that. This is very interesting.
The moral of the story, for instance. So you take something as simple as the moral of the story. What's the moral of the story? And I'm like, okay, then does anything matter inside the experience besides what you can take back as the learning? I'm much more, and this is because I'm a lyric poet who believes in like staying as long as you can in the momentary beauty without understanding it. But I think there's an edge to my phrase, happy ending, not suffering, happy ending story. Because I'm saying, there isn't a happy ending story, even though I'm also acknowledging, as one needs to always do, that there's somebody hurting more in this situation than me.
Yeah. What is incredible about the device, and I want to appreciate the thing about story and parable in a moment here too, but what is lovely about the device is the way that it negates itself almost. Yeah. And I see that this is your point, right?
I'm acknowledging my beef with the entire enterprise of telling stories.
Yeah. And here's a gentle pushback and just for the sake of conversation, but I do think I would stand by this. What I do appreciate about that is consonant with what I think is consonant with what you're saying is that the parable, as I understand Jesus's point of parables to be, is in fact to let those in on a meaning closer in and let those out on a meaning leave them further out and let there be less understanding. And I wonder if it's always what's not said in that story. It's always like the negative, what's left out.
Yes. Well,
that does so much for it. So I want to appreciate that the fact that the reader has to bring that. If you do take the story as concrete and cumulative or comprehensive, then yeah, we have a problem. But I just want to appreciate the nod to a kind of non-understanding that needs to be there, especially in order to keep a narrow focus, to be in the moment that you describe.
Yes.
And to create enough space for a genuine human experience to occur, whatever that might be. And just to simply let it be let yourself be human into the moment.
Yes, I think I'm probably being too doctrinaire saying I hate stories as much as I do, because honestly,
I appreciate it.
The poetic imagination or like my own understanding of language is completely grounded in my upbringing, reading the Bible. And I think what I'm talking about is simplistic interpretations of stories. And I think you're absolutely right that a parable or a story that is worthy of human understanding or engagement or is worthy of us is one that opens toward an invitation to engage with it and perhaps change it.
Yeah.
So the listener is engaging. And actually, this goes back to figuration and metaphor and simile. And in the Bible, I don't think those parables taught one thing. I think those parables taught many things. And
Agree.
And this may be my Protestant, my Reformation coming out, but like a deep ownership of the life of those stories, unspool the story in a bottomless way.
Yeah.
If you let it.
Well said.
Those are stories I could take. What I don't want is a takeaway. What I don't want is a nugget of, well, what you said was this, and that's really hard because that's a way of people pushing discomfort and disequilibrium away, and a way of people not engaging fully in what it means to really suffer. And we all suffer. So
pushing discomfort and inequilibrium away is a really great, important phrase to hear. And I think that, that experience of not wanting a book to end, want to close the book on something is the tension that's there. And allowing something to generate new meanings is, I think, part of what it means to have an imagination that's even alive at all.
And in Sandy Hook in particular, I would often hear people say, I can't imagine. Like people would say that, and they were saying it in a kind way, can't imagine living there. I can't imagine. And I wanted people to imagine. I felt like if we're Americans and we're going to go ahead and not change this gun policy, then actually it's your job to try and imagine. If I don't want you to try to just imagine being me, not someone who lost a child, just me. So I couldn't tell a story exactly because that would be like not inviting. I don't know. Invitational storytelling is really hard.
I can see that. There is something timeless about that. Like you can't allow, there's something maybe even violent about like the kind of concrete objectivizing of this, like the takeaway that you say, or closing the book, or there's a violence that comes to the significance when you don't allow it to simply live and be. And that's what I'm pulling from this paradox of loving the tree and loving the nail, that they are now together.
Yes.
In a way that cannot be disassociated. And it creates a new opportunity for meaning and pain and beauty. That's part of what it is to be human. I need to notice in the theological context as well, like, that there is the kind of cruciform nature of this.
Yeah. I was just about to bring it up myself. Like,
okay.
Yeah. Well, images are wild because images are different from stories, right? But so there's the story of Jesus's crucifixion. And then there's all this stuff that, of course, my narrowing has to do with, I can't tell you how much, or like in my first book, there's a little bit of the original wood. That's the phrase in my book. And it has to do with someone holding some of the cross in their hand. And one of my friends was saying how the last image of the book is me swimming in the ocean. And she's the water closing behind you as a swimmer it's like you're the nail and the tree is the ocean. And of course, with my Southern Baptist upbringing, I was immediately like, and the world is the cross.
Yeah.
Like everything is the tree.
Right. Yeah.
We're the nail. Like we're the nail penetrating Christ. Like it goes wild places. And that's why I like liberating the story and letting the image sort of operate on the story. So yeah, the nail in the tree you can't get away from it. I mean, Christ is there inside it. You might have noticed the book is a series of paragraphs. It's like,
I did.
Like 120 pages of just paragraphs titled.
I think your attention, what you're telling me about yourself and the way that form matters as much as content. And for any poet, that's going to matter. But I want to appreciate about your new book, Songbird, the importance of some of your other poetry that I had seen, the way that spacing and placement on the page helps to bring us back into moments and not attempt to find just one thing to sum everything up.
Right. Like another antidote besides image to story would be the paragraph itself. Isn't that a big enough space? Like, so what's interesting is this Simone Weil piece that we're about to read is from before the shooting. I wrote this essay before the shooting.
But you wrote it before.
Well, thank goodness I had written this before and I had published it because it showed me that I had been concerned about this before.
Yes.
Because the title of this is On Brotherhood and Crucifixion. It's about my boys and whether they can suffer equally. I mean, this particular essay is speaking of, well, if you think about it, it's a little bit of a cheeky interrogation of the crucifixion story, right? Because it's like, okay, yes, we know the crucifixion story, but now I'm going to talk about the person watching the person being crucified and say they are hurting more.
I think it's brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
It's not cheeky.
It's a little cheeky because it's, well, now
you're allowed to say, you could call it cheeky if you want.
Well, now that I'm at a Catholic institution, I realize how way out in space I am with my very opinionated theology that I have. I mean, I have my own theology.
Sure.
That is what we Protestants think we're supposed to do.
That's right.
But anyway, so this is literally something I wrote about the boys when I was studying the iconography of crucifixion inside art, Georgia O'Keeffe, and then Simone Weil. So for context, this is this cult that used to go out into the desert and crucify one of their own in New Mexico. And then at some point they started not nailing, but only hanging the crucified one. This part is called Inside the Murata. Inside the Murata where the men gather, the adobe walls are painted a bright white. In the windows hang curtains on heavy paper, rough-hewn supports, and enough room for the hermanos, lay brothers of the order, to stand facing each other. It's said that they never refuse a request for help. Perhaps this is why Loomis, who was the photographer who took the pictures. Perhaps this is why Loomis was permitted to take his picture. In these quarters, they watch each other draw blood. Perhaps here the crucified received the 4-inch long wound on his side that Loomis reported. It's not visible in the photograph. Simone Weil calls the moment when Christ calls out on the cross, the moment when affliction, human affliction, a suffering of body and soul combined with social degradation, enters the mystical body of God. This is a great privilege for him. He has at last crossed the distance between God and God, something only he can do, she tells us. And thinking of this, I wonder if such a distance finally blooms as interior or exterior space, or a third something I'm incapable of understanding, but somehow related to perspective in painting. The distance is exterior if it's the distance the penitentes walk together from the Murata to the crucifixion point in the hills, or the distance of sky above clouds 4 to the ground below. O'Keeffe, so afraid of flying, she did it only when Alfred Stieglitz lay in a New York hospital and later only for the view. Or the distance is entirely interior, the one I walk from my writing table to the living room, where my 2 sons duel, first with pillows and then with swords. I hear the change in weapon before I see it. Or it's the distance between the swords as they move through space. each swing relative to the other, a third thing that locks them into reticulation with one another. So here's the nail in case you want it.
I do want it.
Okay. So the nail. Concerning the divine technique of the crucifixion, Simone Weil writes that the infinite distance separating God from the creature is entirely concentrated onto one point to pierce the soul at its center. This is the nail whose head is infinite, but whose point is tiny and precise. This is the nail the penitent was asking for, but his brothers, because they would have him live, substitute ropes and therefore open the several distances again.
Reading that back, what's significant now when you take into account the piercing nature of this nail, this practice of the penitentes, and then this observation about your sons?
Well, it's wild to read it now when they're both, one is 18 and one is 22. But I mean, it's funny how things are a core sample of your thinking and how it's reassuring to me how coherent I feel, that like I really have been curious about the crucifixion my whole life and how comforting that is. So that's a personal thing, but also how elemental violence is. And I think that was what I was trying to admit to myself at the end of this paragraph was just, I mean, I believe this truly, that all of us are capable of very violent things. And so one of the things I'm facing there is like the play acting that is basically a human play, a human morality play, like my own boys. They switch from pillows to swords, like boom, like it's, I don't know. And what is that relationship between the piercing of Christ's side and the boys taking up the sword? Just, there's these things, if you take just the images, going back to the idea of the narrow focus of the writer or the poet, there's almost no difference, which is kind of where Weil is headed, I think, too. Like,
it's so powerful. Elemental violence, I think, is something that is really hard for, good Christian people to face.
But this is like the Hannah Arendt stuff, the banality of evil, the idea that like within us,
yes.
I mean, what is it Weil who has that part that says, if 20 people were surrounding me and singing Nazi songs in my own heart, I know I would become a Nazi?
Oh my.
I'm going to have to look it up now. Like, I think about that a lot. People think that they're not capable of things. I actually think the opposite. I'm capable of anything. I'm afraid I'm capable of anything. Let's just say that.
I have to be with you. I have to be with you in it. I mean, there's a kind of, maybe it's narcissism or maybe it's solipsism or some kind of just centering of one's own virtue that gets in the way of acknowledging the human capacity for evil and violence. And I think it's a hard one to swallow. I would take
it further. Like I
Please.
would say, I grant the human capacity for violence, but like for me as a poet who trains herself onto the five senses, sometimes I think it's also animal inside me, like the animal parts of us, the parts that are sensing, the reflexive sensing. I mean, but this is almost like above my pay grade because it's more philosophy, but like, is that I'm making an argument that it's possible the bad things are coming from just the way that nature is violent. And, and you're saying it's something essentially human, but I don't think we'll resolve it, but that's...
No, and I'm not searching to resolve it, and I wouldn't call it essential to humanity necessarily. I wouldn't want to write that into...
Right.
I would say that there's a capacity there, right? If to the extent that freedom is real, there are there's a spaciousness within experience.
Yes.
That can veer into violence sometimes without even knowing it. And it's also important to stipulate it's not necessarily a conscious kind of thing. But to allow that to surface is I think part of appreciating the human experience and trying to come to a process-based or progress in understanding as one goes through their life to make sense of this. I mean, we're always trying to make sense of something.
Sure.
And to the extent that sense can be an additive, meaningful experience, great. But I do want to not close the book on the making sense of something either, that there are new senses all the time and have to be highly attuned to what we're capable of and not make an exception of ourselves, I think.
Yeah, exceptional thinking is dangerous. Maybe also like making sense for me, there's a distinction between making sense of something and dwelling again inside something. And so like intellectual mastery as like a lesser goal than dwelling in experience. So I don't know if that makes sense, but like...
No, I think, I would love to hear you say a little bit more about dwelling in experience, because I think for plenty of people, especially those who say, I can't imagine.
Right.
There is something moving from deep inside, either a fear or a trauma or some other kind of thing that is working against the ability to dwell in one's experience or in the experience of others.
Yeah, I think that sitting quietly with the body in remembrance of how the body felt another time. I know I'm being kind of abstract here, but like I was just thinking as you were talking, I was working on this poem. It's not in Songbird, but it's called On Seeing a Heron Fish in Winter. And I was like really legitimately thinking while I'm working on this poem that I was just enjoying watching a heron fish behind my house in winter. Okay. Like completely only looking and describing that. And then it got a little weird in the middle, as I am aware happens. And the analogy started, the little things. And suddenly I was asking to be the thing it was fishing on the rock. Cut me open on the rock. And I let that all happen. And then the end of the poem was this, which is only saying what's always been true. I tried to love, and out of me came poison.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, still, like to this day, like talking to you about it, like it's a horrible experience. And I realized it was about myself as a mother, that like that fear we have as a parent, speaking of violence, that like we would think we were loving and it would be poison. Isn't this our biggest fear?
Yes.
That we would be bad for our children, like without meaning to. I tried to love and out of me came poison, because in the end, like with the heron was eating a fish and the fish was poisoned by, humankind. Like it doesn't work itself out in the poem at all, because my poems don't work stuff out. But it's just that punch in the gut.
Well, your ability to work with imagery, let the imagery say something and continue to speak, I think is, I wouldn't expect you to kind of wrap it up in that poem. Nor does the heron or the fish expect anything to really wrap up. Right.
And that's, I guess, what I mean by animal.
Yes. I think that does connect back. There is some understanding of ourselves as animal and as body and as flesh and blood, both in its fragility and its violence. I mean, in some ways, I wonder if this is just the sort of like the over-intellectualization of the human experience, when we don't allow embodied realities to simply be there and impress themselves upon us. We're trying to encapsulate through reason.
Yes.
Which does its own work. It's a beautiful thing in itself, but it shouldn't be to the exclusion of understanding I say understanding too, but like it's a different kind of understanding.
Yeah.
It's a being. It's being in the experience, dwelling in the experience, create space that you're in to be oneself. And I think it opens up the path to a kind of flourishing as ourselves as well, that we need to be able to appreciate and feel and experience. And this is what is really emerging in the way that you describe, not just the heron and the fish, the nail in the tree.
Mm-hmm. Those are rhythmically similar.
The pillows and the swords. Yeah. Sure.
So there's lots of duality, obviously, too. Yeah.
But that's what you're bringing together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not an actual dualism that you're describing, because
I dislike those, you might imagine.
I could only imagine that you would. But they can be of service by pulling things together and allowing paradox to exist and facing contradiction down.
Yeah.
And
is it Keats' negative capability is like the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in conversation?
I'm not familiar, and I would love to hear about it if you want to say more about it.
I mean, just that poems do that. That poems that's sort of like a definition of what poetry is supposed to do, is hold contradictory concepts in conversation without destroying the center. And I believe figuration is a big part of that. Like, I believe like in 200 or 300 years, we're not just going to have logical, deductive reasoning, illogic, creativity. I think we're going to open up a whole other thing, and it's going to be analogical thinking as its own thing. And like analogical thinking is actually where the wisdom is.
This kind of analogical thinking is present in medieval theology.
Yeah. Yes. It's not new. It's just been rejected because of the Enlightenment.
We're going to speak directly. We're going to achieve certitude. We're going to.
Yes.
It's the champion of reason.
Yes.
That pushes away from analogy and metaphor and embodied cognition.
Absolutely. And actually, someone had said that Songbird had a Eucharistic sexuality.
Huh.
I know. My editor said that the sexuality in the book is, shall I say, Eucharistic. And I was like, oh my gosh. When he said it, I remembered, this is relating back to medieval theology. Yeah. I remembered, like, in my Southern Baptist church, there was the communion table, very, very plain communion table, not ornamented. The only ornament was the silver cross on the top of the tray of grape juice trays. Like, we didn't drink wine, but carved into it, of course, one of the first sentences I ever read, which I remembered when he said it, was, you're going to know it, do this in remembrance of me. Okay. So I was telling this to my colleague in religious studies, who has studied medieval theology. And I said, I think maybe everything I do is in remembrance of God. Like, to this day, like, I think my 3-year-old self reading that, then all the other things that happened as an adolescent, like, I think I do sex in remembrance of God. I think that is something inside me. I said that to my colleague, and he pulled down the medieval text and showed me that this is what the female mystics, this is a very common idea.
That's right. I think I want to say it's Teresa of Avila, that there is an erotic side of this equation that can't be denied and doesn't need to be scandalized.
Of course we know about it in terms of the bride is the church and the Christ is but we're talking the medieval, they take it to a totally different place.
Yeah, that's right.
I actually took all his books because I was like, okay, if I'm going to, I need to read up on this because I think Songbird might be in conversation with this. And maybe even the whole idea of analogy is in some ways an erotic act because it takes something and it transfigures it.
Yeah. Part of the issue with this, I think, is that Eros has been overly sexualized as well.
Absolutely.
That,
yes.
There is an element of eroticism that is, so it's just around desires and the attraction to and being pulled into. And I would say almost like Trinitarian perichoresis or something like that. Like there's all sorts of ways that allow for an erotic understanding of love and desire to come through here that allows for the body to be kind of incorporated into a spiritual experience.
Yes.
Carol-Ann, your new collection of poems you've described as emerging out of the period in which you were focused on the events of Sandy Hook and the writing of those events and the dwelling in those events that you have offered, and how that has driven you to an understanding, well, a new understanding, I should say, of your own childhood, bringing more of yourself. So I almost see this as a kind of cyclical working back into the narrow focus.
Yes.
And bringing yourself back to an experience of childhood. How does that resonate with you?
I do think, and even the very last correction I made on The Nail in the Tree was to change the title to include the word childhood. So it said Essays on Art, Violence, and Parenting. And then at the last minute, I was like, oh, it's childhood, because the last essay is about me swimming in deep water as a child. And so I can see now that Songbird came from that little change to saying, oh, it's actually about me and about my own experience of childhood. So one of my favorite poems in this collection is actually one of the smaller ones, if you wanted me to read a couple.
I do.
Okay. This is Back to Where Sugar, and it's just about the iconography of my childhood. Back to where sugar on errant tongue blooms. Back to my ordinaries, boiled sweetly on the good eye. Movement of my arms through salt water. What asphalt blisters terrazzo cools. Adumbration of hymns, gathering pine needle thick to accompany coin in laundry jangles. Back to the sloped wood of beach varieties floor, its tray of ill-fitting nails. Back ghost sugar way, after the lunar to the oysters visible under bridge at low tide, the fine hairs of the wrist and legs dangling high in 40 feet of ocean, a sugar drop floating in delicate atmosphere, shimmers of what would out, barely animate then, all that would open, and these my eyes, all that would see.
Amazing. And I'm feeling the nails.
Yeah, there's a lot of what we've talked about.
Yeah, as well as the kind of some fully present duality, I would say.
Yeah.
And yet it's taken in through your eyes, and can't help but find your image of legs dangling in 40 feet of ocean to be really spectacular as well. That's great. A sugar drop floating in delicate atmosphere. And that's what a wonderful depiction of childhood. It's quaint. It's not a quaint one because
there's danger there. Like, people ask me, they're like, what do you mean? I tell people, like, I would swim so far out that I could not see the beach for the curve of the earth. And I was like 8 years old.
That's adventure.
I don't know. Like, that seems so amazing to me now.
It makes sense. There's something that enveloping about it, and the eye floating in delicate atmosphere, because there's a sweetness to the danger as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can read delicate there as fragile, and yet the imagery of the ocean that you're in, or the atmosphere above, it's enfolding and encapsulating. And
there's a whole part in The Nail in the Tree about the oceanic feeling in theology, and how that's one of the basic theological ideas is it's comforting to be small in something big.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the most comforting thing is to be like, I am small. It is big. Or it's terrifying. Some people are terrified by it. I'm comforted by it.
Well, and let us appreciate the depiction of childhood that is. To be small in something big, in the arms of something big, but also the potential for terror. And that's what is important to me about the pairing of the nail in the tree and songbird, is that you're able to bring childhoods together and see the rising and falling of, child to adult maturation and through generations, the cyclical nature of that there's not an ending of it. It's just cyclical. But we're talking about bringing dualities into two cupped hands. We're talking about, sandwiching ourselves between atmosphere and ocean, and to reconnect to the child in us that had the wisdom to see the nail as integrated into the tree.
I guess I would say, if I had anything to offer in all this difficulty, it would be, I heard my son say that. How many times are we missing hearing the thing that would help us? So ears open, eyes up, but also that the beauty is coming in the narrowing and in the precision. So it's intensifying according to our ability to stay present. In that case, it was an exchange from my son. But what if all around us all the time, if we stop and listen, there's a kind of abiding beauty that would not only console us, but allow us to act more thoughtfully toward each other.
Carol Ann, I can't close a conversation like this, the book.
No.
We're not going to wrap up the story.
No.
It's just going to end in a kind of gratitude, and also a remembrance, a remembering of the children of Sandy Hook who lost their lives, and the many people who have lost their lives to gun violence, and the need to continue to hold them.
Yes, we do. We do. We continue to hold all of them.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you for all your work.
For the Life of the World is a production of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture at Yale Divinity School. This episode featured Carol Ann Davis. Production assistance by Alexa Rollo and Emily Brookfield. I'm Evan Rosa, and I edit and produce the show. For more information, visit us online at faith.yale.edu, where you can find past episodes, articles, books, and other educational resources that help people envision and pursue lives worthy of our humanity. If you're a new listener, thanks so much for joining us. Remember to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. And if you happen to be a loyal supporter and a faithful listener, our request today is to join us in our year-end giving campaign, to make a one-time gift toward the work of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, or to make a monthly commitment for 2026. Something as modest as $5 or $10 a month, multiplied by however many people are listening right now, would make a really significant contribution to the work we're preparing to do in 2026. And if you feel so inclined, head over to faith.yale.edu/give. But hey, if you just want to share this episode, that's cool too. As always, we're thankful that you're listening, friends, and we'll be back with more soon.